Geno Smith has yet to play it down in a regular season game in Ryan Grubb's offense, but could the Seahawks be looking to lock him up long-term before the start of the season? We'll be breaking down some of the latest scoop here on our second episode on Thursday here of Locked On Seahawks.
You are Locked On Seahawks, your daily Seattle Seahawks podcast, part of the Locked On Podcast Network. Your team every day.
Greetings, 12. This is Corbin Smith, host of the Locked On Seahawks podcast, your daily Seahawks podcast, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. Glad to be joined, as always, by my co-host in crime, Rob Rang, and a special thanks to each and every one of the 12s listening in, whether you are down in Portland, Oregon, or across the country in Richmond, Virginia. We greatly appreciate each and every one of you for making Locked On Seahawks your first listen 5 days a week. The Seahawks have wrapped up their joint practices with the Tennessee Titans, and Rob's going to have some different insight to add on that. We're going to put a bow on the joint practices heading into Saturday's preseason game in Nashville. Plus, we'll be catching up with Anthony Bradford as he's in the middle of a competition at right guard in our final one-on-one training camp interview. This episode is brought your way by FanDuel. Make every moment more as the playoffs wind down. The sports stop sporting like we want them to. But this summer, FanDuel is hooking up all customers with a boost or a bonus daily. That's right. There's something for everyone every day, all summer long. Visit FanDuel.com to get started. Now for your lead story here on our Thursday edition of Locked On Seahawks. Geno Smith has yet to play even in a preseason game in Ryan Grubb's offense to this point. A lot of fans out there would be hesitant to give him a new contract without at least seeing what he looks like in this offense. And yet, there's some scoopage out there that the Seahawks may be considering extending Geno Smith before the start of the season. And Rob, I know for some fans that, as I just mentioned, this might be kind of a difficult pill to swallow because they don't necessarily know with a 33 going on 34-year-old quarterback that has not played in this system, has had 9 straight wins the last 2 years, but hasn't won a playoff game. There may be some hesitation among some fans to get a deal done, and yet there's a lot of reasons why this could very well be a win-win for both the player and the team.
Yeah, no question about it, Corey. But I mean, when you're talking about a quarterback who is as accurate as Geno Smith is, he has demonstrated that, of course, in Shane Waldron's offense. And anybody who has been to the Virginia Mason Athletic Center and seen the way that Geno Smith is just continuing to throw the ball with such precision in Ryan Grubb's offense, then it's easy to just kind of, project forward as to how successful that Geno Smith could be in this system. And when you look at the contracts that you're seeing, young quarterbacks like Tua Tagovailoa, who signed a 4-year, $212 million deal, Jordan Love and Green Bay Packers, 4-year, $220 million deal. Neither of them have had the statistical success over the past 2 seasons that Geno Smith has had, then I think that it's easy to understand why there might be some buzz out there for the Seahawks to lock him up for the long term. That said, I do think that this would be a significant departure from what John Schneider has done in the past. Typically, he has looked to extend players when they are reaching the final year of their deal. Geno Smith is not only under contract, of course, this season, but next year as well. And again, the bugaboo that everybody needs to acknowledge is the fact that Geno Smith is going to be turning 34 years old in October. Now, while he is a relatively young 34, no question about it, at the same time, 34 is 34. And so if you're talking about long-term future, then basically what you're saying is that you think that Geno Smith is going to be like a Tom Brady or a Rich Gannon or a quarterback or Kurt Warner, a quarterback who got better with age, so to speak. And I do think that there has to be at least some hesitancy before you do that. I personally am more on the board of the idea of allowing Geno Smith to play out this season and keep that proverbial carrot in front of him to see if he comes back and has the comeback player of the year type of season this year that he had a couple of seasons ago.
Just to backtrack for a second, because where this came from today, our good friend Jason Puckett, who previously worked for KJR, he now has his own podcast, and he had Mike Garafolo of NFL Network joining the show. And this is where this started from. But I will say that I have heard some rumblings behind the scenes. I didn't necessarily put much credence to it. But now that Mike Garafolo is coming out and saying things like this, he said that the Seahawks and Geno Smith, they've talked about it. They've tried to talk about it. That's something that has been broached this offseason. So could it be something that gets done before week 1 and isn't addressed by the team? I don't sense anything is imminent. We'll see. So that's really the key here, is that Mike Garafolo was not coming out saying, oh, this is going to get done in the next 2 weeks. That was not what was being said there. But at the same time, if you were listening to his entire response, he did make it sound like this was a possibility, and the two sides have certainly been talking. And I'm going to throw this out there just to provide a little bit more of an understanding why the Seahawks might consider doing this right now. If you look at overthecap.com right now, Rob, the Seahawks are not in good financial shape next year. Their salary cap is barely above the red line for next year. They've got a lot of big contracts, and Geno Smith's cap hit goes up to $38.5 million. The Seahawks have the opportunity to create as much as $10 million by extending Geno Smith beyond 2025 off of next year's cap hit. And they've also got the opportunity, as Mike McDonald's pointed out, to lock up one of their leaders. And it's been clear listening, Rob, some of the things that Mike McDonald has said recently, that he is viewing this as a multi-year thing with Geno Smith. He has not sounded like a coach that is in a wait-and-see mode with his quarterback, and he's now had all this offseason and training camp to work with him. So maybe he and Ryan Grubb are looking at this as a situation where, hey, we love the quarterback that we have here. John Schneider, get this done so we know that he's here long-term with us.
Yeah, and I think that makes all the sense in the world. As I said previously, when you see Geno Smith's accuracy in person, it really does stand out. I'm fortunate enough to be here in Denver, actually watching the Seahawks regular season opening day opponent, Denver Broncos, and they have a couple of veterans in Zach Wilson and in Jarrett Stidham, as well as their prize first-round selection, Bo Nix. And quite frankly, I don't think that any of those three have the accuracy that Geno Smith has demonstrated. And as I've mentioned in previous shows, I was in LA, doing a tour of the different NFL teams that have their training camps there: the Rams, the Chargers, the New Orleans Saints, the Dallas Cowboys, and the Las Vegas Raiders. And again, there's some big name quarterbacks in that list, Corbin. I haven't seen any of them throw the ball with the precision and the confidence that Geno Smith has shown in a new offense. So again, I am not questioning the intelligence and the anticipation that the Seahawks would be showing if they were to ink Geno Smith to a long-term extension at this point. I am just kind of mentioning that, again, we have not seen John Schneider do this in the past, and I do think that it would be wise to at least give a little bit of time to make sure that he is going to be successful in Ryan Grubb's offense, and frankly, to make sure the Seahawks can protect him. There's no reason to believe that Geno Smith is not going to have another fantastic season. Again, the accuracy that he's shown, the skill position talent that the Seahawks have accumulated, and I personally am very, very high on Seattle's offensive line. I think it's going to be the best offensive line in terms of sacks allowed that the Seahawks have had in, I don't know, since the last time they went to a Super Bowl. But at the same time, again, you're talking about a quarterback who is going to be turning 34, a quarterback who has already said publicly that he does plan on running more often. And again, I just think that it can be very dangerous to already be extending a player of his age when you have not yet seen him perform in this new system.
Yep, that's really going to be the multi-million-dollar question for John Schneider, Mike McDonald Company. Are you comfortable with the idea of extending a player who still has 2 years left on his current contract and has not played any games in the system and is going to be 34 during the middle of the season? You've got to look at the comfort level here. If I had to make a prediction, I don't see this happening before week 1. I think that we are at a stage where John Schneider's probably not going to be doling out big bucks there for the quarterback. But at the same time, if Geno Smith gets off to a really good start, this would buck a trend. We have not seen John Schneider do very many contracts with players in the middle of the season, but I could see that being a case where the Seahawks say, look, he's out there performing. He looks great in this offense. The leader that he is in the locker room, we are going to ink him up for 2026 or 2027 even, and let's get that extension in terms of moving some of that money further down the line so we have some cap space to work with next year, and we can reward our quarterback in the process. So I think this is going to be a very fascinating situation to watch unfold here in coming weeks and even months to see how Geno Smith does in this offense and if it could mean more security for him as the starting quarterback for the Seattle Seahawks. When we come back, joint practices wrapped up today in Tennessee. We've had a chance to dive into a number of topics coming out of Nashville, but there's plenty more to talk about, especially with Rob Rang now joining the show. The two of us are going to have some closing thoughts, put a little bit of a bow on the first joint practices the Seahawks have had since 1991. We'll get to that up next here on our Thursday edition of Locked On Seahawks. Locked On Seahawks is sponsored by BetterHelp. What's the first thing you do if you had an extra hour in your day? For me, I wish I had a little bit more time to play college football 25 on my Xbox. My wife might not want to hear me say that, but the best way to squeeze that special thing into your schedule is to know what's important to you and make it a priority. Therapy can help you find what matters to you so you can do more of it, and BetterHelp Online Therapy will assess your needs and can match you with your own licensed professional therapist in less than 48 hours. If you're thinking of starting therapy, give BetterHelp a try. It's entirely online, designed to be convenient, flexible, and suited to your schedule. Just fill out a brief questionnaire to get matched with a licensed therapist today and switch therapists anytime for no additional charge. Learn to make time for what makes you happy with BetterHelp. Get 10% off your first month at BetterHelp.com/lockedon. That's 10% off your first month of online therapy at BetterHelp.com/lockedon. Welcome back to the Thursday edition of Locked On Seahawks. I'm your host, Corbin Smith. Glad to be joined as always by my co-host in crime, Rob Rang. And a special thanks to each and every one of the 12s tuning in. Thank you as always for making Locked On Seahawks your first listen 5 days a week. We greatly appreciate it. Shifting gears back to joint practices, the Seahawks wrapped up the second of two padded practices against the Titans in Nashville today. And Rob, there's obviously a lot of fun stuff coming out of Tennessee right now. The Music City, the guy who was making music with his mouth and his play was Devin Witherspoon. There's no question about it. I think I could hear him in my office jawing with Quandre Diggs and Jamal Adams way over here in Colorado. I'm pretty sure I could hear Devin Witherspoon and what he was saying on the field, the energy that he brings. We got to see Reek Woolen have two dominant practices working against Calvin Ridley. Christian Haynes getting his first opportunity with the first team at right guard and making those opportunities count. A number of storylines coming out of there, but we haven't had a chance to hear from you on this front. And with you being on a training camp circuit right now, I know that you've heard plenty of details coming out of Nashville in regard to these Seahawks joint practices to continue the discussion and kind of put a bow on these two invaluable practices for the Seahawks.
Yeah, and I appreciate that, Corbin. As you said, I am not in Nashville myself, but I have reached out to some folks, and I do think that it's important to kind of keep some perspective because, you know, the media who are there in Nashville, they're going to be very much be watching this from purely a Seahawk perspective, and of course, the media in Tennessee, they're going to be watching it from very much a Titans perspective. So I think that's important to kind of weigh both of those and try to add some perspective. Again, anybody who watched the Seahawks just pummel the Los Angeles Chargers, that preseason opener, it was exciting. I mean, this was a defense that struggled against the run a year ago, of course, and for them to be clearly the more physical team was very exciting until you recognize the fact that the Chargers, you know, didn't have very many of their starters on the field. No Justin Herbert, Austin Eckler now is a member of the Washington Commanders, no Joey Bosa, no Khalil Mack, no Keenan Allen, no Mike Williams. They're elsewhere also. So again, I think that's important to recognize. And the same thing here with the Tennessee Titans. I mean, you have to understand that they're starting. You mentioned, for example, that Calvin Ridley was on the field for the Titans, and this is the former first-round pick. But he's also he's on his third team in 5 NFL seasons. So that says something about just the reliability that some of his previous clubs thought of him as a route runner. And same with the interception, for example. That's getting all the buzz buzz here for Devin Witherspoon, the one where he picks off Will Levis, the presumptive starter for the Titans, an exciting young second-year quarterback who's got a massive arm, but you've always had questions about his accuracy and his anticipation. He throws 2 interceptions today, and one of them that Devin Witherspoon picked off was a route where he was going up against a former undrafted free agent, Mason Kinsey, a 5'10", 190-pounder who, played his college ball at a D3 Barry University. He ran a 4.65, and so again, Devin Witherspoon's a terrific football player. He's going to make plays against all-pro caliber quarterbacks and wide receivers. But I do think that it's important to kind of keep that perspective. Rick Rowland had a terrific play, as you mentioned, against Calvin Ridley in the end zone. That, to me, is very exciting as well. But you also mentioned the fact that Christian Haynes is now getting the start, at least in today's practice, at the right guard position, jumping ahead of
Anthony
Bradford. And I think one of the reasons why it's interesting that Anthony Bradford was demoted, at least in this practice, is the fact that Jeffrey Simmons had a dominant day each of the last 2 days in practice, not just against Anthony Bradford, but across Seattle's entire offensive line. And so that, to me, is interesting. It wasn't just Jeffrey Simmons, who's a superstar. I mean, he's absolutely one of the top 10 defensive linemen in all of the NFL. You expect him to have a strong performance. But Quinton Bohanna, a big man, Tavondre Sweat, another guy. These are each 350-pound run-plugging kind of a guys. They were tossing Seattle's interior offensive linemen around, and that is a huge concern for the Seahawks, considering how much they struggled to run the football a year ago. So, again, while there is a lot to be excited about from the Seahawks practices, especially the fact that they went to Tennessee, had these practices, and they escaped, it appears to be, any major injuries. But at the same time, I don't want Seahawks fans out there to be thinking that the Seahawks win to Tennessee and absolutely dominate, because there was definitely plenty of big plays from the Titans as well.
I'm glad you mentioned the offensive line standpoint, because I was left wondering, not being able to attend to these practices with the car breaking down and everything else that went down this week. But I was wondering, coming out of Wednesday's practice and then going into today, you're giving Christian Haynes this opportunity. Was there something that jumped out Wednesday with Anthony Bradford that suggests, maybe we should give the rookie a look here? And I know that he earned that opportunity with the way he played Saturday, but you mentioned Quinton Bohanna, who everything I have heard is that he was making life very difficult for the interior blockers for the Seahawks, except for one player. Christian Haynes today in one-on-ones drove him to the ground, and then, much to the irk of Bohanna, kept shoving him while he was on the ground in the back. That is the kind of player we're talking about, Christian Haynes here. He is going to go to the whistle. He's going to keep fighting, and he gets under guys' skin. He did it to Derek Hall the other day at training camp practice, and both of them got kicked out in one-on-ones. This team has needed that orneriness, that feistiness in the offensive line. I'm not advocating for post-whistle mistakes. In games, those things kill you, but at the same time, you've got to have some physical players that have that edge to them, and I feel like that's been missing from this offensive line. So you could look at this 2 ways. One, it was Anthony Bradford. Again, I was not there. I can't speak to this, but did he struggle enough in that Wednesday practice against some of Tennessee's big bodies that it warranted taking that look at Christian Haynes during the second joint practice, or was it something they already had planned? Or could it be that Laken Tomlinson got thrown around quite a bit? Maybe Seattle's looking at this as a situation where let's get Christian Haynes some reps the first team, and then maybe we could slide him over to left guard. Maybe he and Bradford both start together. I'm still not completely ruling out that could be the lineup at some point this season, sandwiching those 2 young guards around Connor Williams.
Yeah, I 100% agree with you. I think that is very much part of Seattle's plan, at least as a consolation prize kind of a plan. I think if they want Laken Tomlinson to be that steadying force at left guard, because I think that they were anticipating that it was going to be Oluwatimi at center, and of course a relatively young player in Charles Cross, left tackle positions. You have kind of a glue guy in the veteran Laken Tomlinson at left guard. But now that you have Connor Williams coming into the fold at the center position, and he was there at Tennessee Tennessee, actually fielding some snaps as part of, Scott Huff's offensive line drills today. But at the same time, he was not yet in pads and is not going to play in the second preseason game against the Titans. I do think that that's an interesting idea, that Seattle may have a little bit of a youth movement at the guard positions with, again, with Christian Haynes at the left guard position, perhaps Anthony Bradford at right guard. I think that that's going to just add to your size, physicality, and as you said, orneriness that the Seahawks, frankly, have been lacking along the offensive line. Really quickly, one other thing I want to make sure that I mention is while it does appear that the Seahawks are going to be leaving these joint practices relatively unscathed, there still is a few injury bugaboos out there that the Seahawks fans should be kind of keeping an eye on. Tyler Lockett was not on the field, apparently with some type of a leg injury. Zach Charbonnet has some type of a back injury. That's a huge concern at the running back position, but it does potentially create a situation where Kenny McIntosh is not dead. I mean, he is right there with George Halani fighting for that third team or perhaps even second team reps if there is something significant going on with Zach Charbonnet. Draymond Jones continues to be out. So again, there are some injury concerns popping their heads up there for the Seahawks. None of them appear to be major at this point, but frankly, Corbin, you and I became a little bit of experts at being able to kind of read between the tea leaves when Pete Carroll was at the podium. I have not yet developed that comfort with Mike McDonald being able to kind of parse his words. So I'm just kind of curious to see, how healthy the Seahawks actually are here in, basically as we get closer to week 2 of the preseason.
Yeah, I think you look at the injury situation, like we used to joke about it, but if Pete Carroll said something was legit, like that raised the alarms. Like this is a significant injury, and you had code words. And Mike McDonald, maybe eventually we will reach a point where we can kind of look through the smoke and figure out what's being said. But like Farrell Brown's another player. We talked about this, Connor Benintendi and I, on our earlier episode today when this first came out, that he was carted off and it was supposedly a knee injury. But then Mike McDonald says it was a foot injury. So we're still trying to figure out the coach speak here for Mike McDonald when it comes to the injury aspect. And that would probably be the one that is the most alarming, the most concerning, just because he did get carted off the field. He was grabbing his knee, even though they said it's a foot injury. Who knows what really is going on there? But Draymond Jones has been out for most of training camp. They got him back this weekend. He didn't even last a full practice before he tweaked, I'm assuming, his hamstring again. Didn't practice again today. Zach Charbonnet has been out for a couple days. Lockett, I can't remember the last time that he participated in a normal practice. So it feels like we're kind of at that point with some of these veterans that the Seahawks are kind of putting guys in bubble wrap. But I guess generally the good news is most of these seem minor by nature, with Farrell Brown being the one that we, of course, need to see what the update is once things start to be released a little bit, because that is the one injury that looks like it could be potentially significant for the Seahawks as they head into Saturday's second preseason game and draw closer to the final cutdown day on August 27th. When we come back, going to be tying up loose ends with our one-on-one training camp series. We were just talking about Christian Haynes and Anthony Bradford getting ready to duke it out for that right guard position here as training camp unwinds and the preseason unwinds. Had a chance to catch up with Anthony Bradford at the VMAC to talk to him about playing for Scott Huff, this new system, and much more. We'll get to that up next here on our Thursday edition of Locked On Seahawks. This episode of Locked On Seahawks is brought your way by FanDuel. We love sports. We love them so much that we never want them to stop. But now that the Olympics are over, we don't have NBA or NHL playoffs. We've got fewer games. The sports aren't sportsing like we want them to. FanDuel lets us keep the sports going whenever we want. All we have to do is open the app and dream up bets anytime we're in the mood. Right now, new customers get $200 in bonus bets guaranteed. That's $200 win or lose. Who is going to end up winning the Cy Young Award in Major League Baseball? Is Byron Murphy II now the favorite to win Rookie of the Year in the NFL? Is Aaron Judge going to get to 60 home runs again for the Yankees? You can bet on it all on an app that is safe, secure, and easy to use. So what are you waiting for? Visit FanDuel.com and add a big win to your summer bucket list today. FanDuel, America's #1 sportsbook. Welcome back to the Thursday edition of Locked On Seahawks. This is your host, Corbin Smith. Glad to be joined, as always, by my co-host in crime, Rob Rang. And a special thanks to each and every one of the 12s out there. Thank you, as always, for making Locked On Seahawks your first listen 5 days a week. We greatly appreciate it. For your second listen, make sure to check out the Locked On Fantasy Football podcast. Get your daily insight to the best fantasy draft strategies so you can win your league this season. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. Up until yesterday, it didn't feel like there was really a competition at the right guard position for the Seahawks. Anthony Bradford had gotten all of the first team reps in the first 3+ weeks of training camp. He started at right guard in the preseason opener against the Chargers. It really felt like he had that position on lockdown. Of course, as we mentioned a few moments ago, Rob, Christian Haynes getting some reps of the ones today in Tennessee. So this may very well still be a wide open race leading up to the season opener against the Denver Broncos. But certainly at this point, Anthony Bradford has gotten the vast majority of the reps. He seems to be taking to Ryan Grubb's offense. And we know when you're looking for pure tenacity and physicality off the line of scrimmage, pass protection wasn't great last year for Anthony Bradford, but as a run blocker, as a mauler, this may be the guy that can really get that run game going for the Seattle Seahawks in 2024.
Yeah, no question about it. I mean, frankly, he did that a year ago as a rookie, and as a 4th-round pick at that. As you said, Corbin, he is still very much a work in progress in terms of pass protection, but just in terms of his size, his physicality. I mean, 6'5", 330 pounds, and again, as you said, I mean, he plays with a nastiness that, frankly, very few of Seattle's other starting offensive linemen have demonstrated, and that is one of the things that Christian Haynes, of course, has as well. So I think that it's going to be a fascinating battle. I do believe that Anthony Bradford is a legitimate starting interior offensive lineman in the NFL. So if Christian Haynes is able to beat out Bradford, then, hey, kudos to the Seahawks. That just means that they have 2 young quality guards as well as a veteran in Laken Tomlinson. And then, oh, by the way, McClendon Curtis is a terrific player as well. He's just showing what he can do at the right tackle position. But again, to me, Corbin, this is a good problem to have, and frankly, a good problem that the Seahawks haven't had, very often over the last decade or so.
Yeah, this is a great opportunity for both Bradford and Haynes to really seize a role in this offensive line. As I mentioned earlier, maybe there's a way you can get both of them in the starting lineup together. But I enjoyed having the opportunity to chat with Anthony Bradford at the VMAC in one of our exclusive one-on-one interviews and chat about playing for Scott Huff, the new scheme, and a number of different things. Take a listen. First time with this new coaching staff. How's it been working with Scott Huff and compared him to, say, Andy Dickerson last year in your college coaching?
It's been good. I feel like he connected with us getting us with a good mindset as an O-line, coming out physical, stuff like that. So it's been good.
You had a chance now to be able to look back at your film, get to start 10 games last year. What were some things that stood out to you as far as your positives and areas where, like, hey, I got to really work on this going into the offseason?
I feel like my positives been my positives for a long time. You know what I'm saying? I'm a powerful dude. I can move people off the ball, assert my strength on people, no matter who in front of me. Things I can work on is like, pass rush, just being more under control, just technique-wise.
This off season, being from Muskegon, did you do all your training back home, or did you work out here?
No, I worked out mostly in Dallas during this off season, and then I did some workouts here. I went home for probably about a week, but did most of my training in Dallas.
So did you spend most of your off season? I was just wondering if you still spend any time back home.
Yeah, for sure. I had like a little backpack job and did a little camp back at home, so I always pop back at home when I got a chance.
What does it mean to you to be able to go back and do that now that you're in the league? I'm just fascinated by it because I grew up in northern Indiana, and my dad and I used to go up, and we used to go up to Muskegon and go fishing quite a bit.
It means a lot to me, you know what I'm saying? Being from a small town, Muskegon, Michigan, a lot of people don't know about it. So me being able to go back and show my face and have the kids realize that, dreams are real, coming from where we come from, it always means a lot to me, for sure.
You joined an offensive line last year that had a lot of really young players. This year, Laken Tomlinson and George Fant come in. And Fant's obviously only played the tackle position, but very unique background. Tomlinson's started 140 games at guard. What has it been like to have two guys like that join this offensive line group with all the young players that you guys had around?
Like you said, we got a lot of young players on the team, on the line specifically. But just having some seasoned players in there that can give us like little tips here and there, how to do this and how to do that, and really just getting leaders in the room. Because like you said, like a lot of young dudes in the room, like it's kind of hard, or it kind of takes a little bit longer to find a leader in the room. With older guys in the room, it's kind of like leaders are already established, and you know, it's expectations of them knowing that they played a long time in the league.
Is there anything specifically that you've been able to pick from Lakin Tomlinson's brain with all the snaps he's played and the durability that I mean, I don't know very many guards that played that many games, knock on wood.
Really just, you know, adding on to my toughness. Like you say, he played a lot of games and haven't missed a lot of games, so really just adding on to my toughness and mindset. And really, like I said, I've been working on staying under control, and Lakin Tomlinson have that, you know, really down pat. So really just picking that from his brain on how to like play smooth, play with a clear mind, and be under control.
What's it been like getting to learn this offense? How does it compare to the systems that you've played in previously?
It's pretty fun, to be honest. We're playing smash football for sure, so it gives us a lot of chances to show our abilities and stuff like that. And then plus we got the receivers to do when we do pass the ball. So it's going to be fun. A lot of touchdowns, a lot of nice pancake blocks out of that. So it's going to be everything.
What's your ultimate goal for this season, individually and from a team perspective?
Individually, just getting better. Playing more poised than I did last year. You know, last year was my rookie season, getting thrown in there. So just playing more poised as one. And for the team, just, you know, doing better than last year. You know what I'm saying? We're working towards the Super Bowl. So first step again to the Super Bowl is just going one game by game and really just making it to the playoffs and going from there.
As always, you can follow me on X and Threads at Corbin Smith NFL. You can follow Rob at Rob Rang. Make sure to subscribe to Locked On Seahawks on YouTube and wherever you listen to your podcast to make sure you don't miss a single episode. Coming up tomorrow, it's Blue Friday. Nick Lee and I will be diving into our weekly preview as the Seahawks get ready to face off against the Titans in their second preseason game. You won't want to miss it. Enjoy the rest of your Thursday, and thanks for listening in. Go Hawks.